Somewhere in Virginia, there is a professor who woke up one morning and decided that the most important thing a college honor student could study in a semester was Bad Bunny. Not calculus, not constitutional law, not organic chemistry. Bad Bunny. And before anyone prepares a sarcastic comment about the state of higher education, pause, because the reason this class exists, the way it was designed, and what it is actually doing to students who walk into that room is more serious, more layered, and more academically intentional than the headline makes it sound. Shh, turn the volume up, but keep it low. This is Rap Deepest Secrets, the one place the labels can't control, exposing the codes, the cover-ups, the real cost of fame. Now, back to the video. Christopher Newport University, a school most people outside the state of Virginia have genuinely never thought about for a single second in their lives, has launched an honors seminar called Bad Bunny, Musica, Cultura, and Revolution. Real course, real university, real academic credits. Students sitting in actual chairs with actual syllabi about to spend an entire semester unpacking one of the most commercially dominant, culturally complex, and deliberately provocative artists on the planet. And the professor behind it is not doing this for attention. He is doing it because he has a plan, and the plan is bigger than Bad Bunny. Stay right there, because this is where it starts to get suspicious. Dr. Mike Levine is an assistant professor of musicology at Christopher Newport University. He has spent years doing serious academic research on music in Cuba, not as a hobby, not as a side interest, but as a scholarly pursuit. This is a man who understands Latin music and culture at a depth that most people who casually enjoy reggaeton on a playlist have never been asked to consider. When Levine looked at Bad Bunny, at his catalog, his performance choices, his public persona, his politics, his business decisions, his relationship with Puerto Rican identity, he did not see just a pop star. He saw a semester. He saw a lens, a way into an entire world of Latin life, Latin history, Latin culture, and Latin music that American academic institutions have historically treated as peripheral at best, invisible at worst. And he saw an artist whose name, whose face, whose presence was magnetic enough to get students of any major, any background, any level of prior interest in Latin culture, into a room and engaged before the first real lesson even began. That is the strategic genius of what Levine built, and it is worth understanding before going any further. Because the class is not called Introduction to Reggaeton, it is not called Latin Music History, it is not called anything that would cause a student to scroll past it during course registration. It is called Bad Bunny, Musica, Cultura, and Revolution. And that name is doing a very specific job. Bad Bunny, born Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio in Vega Baja, Puerto Rico, is known as the King of Latin Trap. The nickname did not come from any grand declaration or industry branding campaign. It came from something far more human and far more chaotic. A childhood photograph of him dressed as a rabbit, looking genuinely deeply annoyed at the situation, surfaced online and became a piece of cultural mythology. The image matched his energy. The name stuck. His music sits at the intersection of multiple worlds simultaneously: reggaeton, Latin trap, hip-hop influence, Puerto Rican identity, political activism, unapologetic gender nonconformity in performance, which is a very academic way of saying Bad Bunny does not care what anyone expects from him, has never cared, and has been making that statement loudly and on purpose since before most of his current fanbase fully understood what he was communicating. He has painted his nails, he has worn dresses, he has spoken publicly about issues affecting Puerto Rico, colonialism, disaster relief failures, government corruption, with a directness that most mainstream artists carefully avoid. He has built a business empire around an identity that refuses to compromise for crossover appeal. He has never released a song primarily in English to chase a demographic that was not already his. And then came the Super Bowl. His halftime performance, done entirely in Spanish, centered completely and deliberately on Puerto Rican heritage, unapologetic in every frame, set off days of conversation, days of coverage. Days of people who had never listened to a single Bad Bunny album suddenly having opinions about what his performance meant, who it was for, and what it said about the state of American pop culture. Dr. Levine was watching all of it, and he had already been thinking, "Bad Bunny to me is a smokescreen for everything reggaeton." That is a direct quote from Levine, and it is one of the most precise academic sentences anyone has said about this artist in a formal setting. A smokescreen, not an insult, not a dismissal, a strategy. Because reggaeton, and Latin trap alongside it, carries layers of meaning that run far deeper than most American audiences have been invited to explore. These are genres born from Afro-Caribbean musical traditions, shaped by hip-hop influence, carrying the weight of colonialism, racial identity, class struggle, and cultural survival. They have been dismissed as too loud, too sexual, too foreign, too urban. They have been excluded from mainstream award conversations for decades, while simultaneously generating billions of streams and filling stadiums across the world. There is an enormous gap between how these genres have been treated by cultural institutions and what they actually represent and contain. Bad Bunny lives in that gap. He came out of that gap. His entire career is a response to that gap, and Levine understood that using Bad Bunny's name on a syllabus was the fastest way to get American college students, many of whom have never been asked to sit with any of this seriously, into a room where the real conversation could begin. The name gets them in, the curriculum does the rest. Now here's where the story shifts into something that should genuinely make anyone paying attention lean forward. During a recent session of the class, students at Christopher Newport were not doing what most people would imagine a Bad Bunny class looks like. They were not just watching music videos and discussing favorite tracks. They were dissecting masculinity. They were examining racial stereotypes, how they are constructed, how they are reinforced, how they move through music and media and popular culture without most audiences stopping to notice. They were engaging with the racial connotations embedded in how Latin music has been packaged, sold, and consumed by audiences outside the culture. They were sitting with the politics of representation. They were listening to lyrics, not just hearing them the way most people hear a song on a commute, but actually listening, finding layers, finding the emotional architecture underneath the production, finding meaning and depth in words that on the surface might sound like party music and underneath are carrying the weight of an entire island's complicated relationship with its own identity and its relationship to American power. One student said something during the discussion that stopped the room. Bad Bunny really brings to the surface things other people ignore in all of his music. You can tell he is very emotional about it. That is not a fan comment. That is a student doing exactly what a liberal arts education is supposed to train people to do, moving past the surface of a thing, sitting with the discomfort of its complexity, and choosing to take it seriously even when the culture around them might not. Gabi McGeehee, a political science major in the class, described the experience as genuinely eye-opening, not in a polite, vague way, in the specific way that happens when a person encounters a perspective they did not know they were missing. That is the class working exactly the way it was designed to work. This is the moment to stop everything and subscribe. Because what is happening at Christopher Newport University is not a feel-good story about a cool professor doing something unconventional. It is a signal about something much larger, about how Latin music and Latin culture are finally, slowly, partially beginning to be taken seriously inside academic institutions that have historically treated them as background noise. And this channel covers exactly these kinds of signals, the ones underneath the headline, the ones where the real meaning is sitting quietly, waiting for someone to stop scrolling long enough to see it. Subscribe right now, hit the button, turn on notifications, because this channel does this to every single story it touches, finds the layer most people never reach, and stays there long enough to actually understand what it means. Subscribe first, then keep watching, because the part that reframes everything is coming next. Here is what the headline does not say. Here is what most coverage of this story has completely missed. The course at Christopher Newport is an honors seminar, not a casual elective stuffed into a schedule to hit a credit requirement. An honors seminar, which means it carries a different level of academic rigor, a different expectation of intellectual engagement, and a different kind of student investment than a standard course offering. It is open to students of all majors: political science, biology, business, engineering, English. Any student who wants to be there can be there. Levine designed it that way intentionally because the conversation Bad Bunny opens up does not belong to music students alone. It belongs to anyone trying to understand how culture works, how identity is constructed, how art carries political weight, and how the things most people consume as entertainment are actually doing something far more complex underneath the surface. The university positioned the course as an example of what it calls the strategic compass priority to advance the power and promise of an education embedded in the liberal arts. That is official institutional language. That is a university saying formally and on record that a seminar about Bad Bunny belongs in the same academic framework as its most serious scholarly commitments. That is not nothing. That is actually a very big deal, and Dr. Levine knows it. He has said openly that he has never taught a class like this before, that the level of engagement from students has genuinely surprised him, that there is more to unpack in Bad Bunny's catalog, career, and cultural position than he can fully cover in a single semester, that he feels fortunate, his word, to wake up and teach this material. This is a musicologist, a scholar who has spent a career doing serious academic research on Latin music, saying that a class structured around a reggaeton artist is one of the most alive teaching experiences he has had. That sentence deserves to sit for a moment. And now, the twist, the part that changes how everything before it looks. It was never really about Bad Bunny. It has always been about what Bad Bunny gives a professor permission to teach. Think about what Levine actually built here. He did not create a class about reggaeton history because a class called History of Reggaeton will fill with students who already care about the subject. He did not create a class called Latin Music and Social Identity because that title signals academic density before the first day. He created a class with a name that functions as an invitation, a name that reaches students who might otherwise never choose to spend a semester thinking critically about Latin culture, Puerto Rican identity, colonial history, racial politics in music, gender and performance, and the sociology of what it means for a Spanish-language artist to dominate a platform built for English. Bad Bunny is the magnet, the curriculum is the real destination, and the students who walk in thinking they signed up for something fun and easy walk out having engaged with questions that universities spend entire departments trying to get students to take seriously. Masculinity, racial representation, cultural authenticity, the politics of language in music, the economics of identity, the weight of an island's history carried inside a pop star's choices. None of that is light material. All of it showed up in a class named after a man who got his nickname from a childhood Halloween costume. That is the design, that is the genius of it, and that is the thing worth talking about. Bad Bunny has sold out stadiums across multiple continents. He has broken streaming records that people thought would stand for a generation. He performed at the Super Bowl in Spanish, without translation, without accommodation, without apology, in front of one of the largest television audiences in American broadcasting history. He has made $66 million in a single year without releasing a new album. He has won a Grammy for Album of the Year for the first predominantly Spanish-language album to ever receive that honor. He has been nominated at the 30th Annual Webby Awards for Community and Fan Engagement, recognized not by the music industry but the internet itself. And now, in a classroom at Christopher Newport University in Virginia, he is a seminar subject, an academic lens, a jumping-off point for one of the more honest conversations about Latin culture, racial politics, and the hidden depth of music that a group of American college students has been asked to have in a formal educational setting. The king of Latin trap did not ask for any of this. He just made music that was impossible to ignore. And it turns out that music that is impossible to ignore is also, when examined closely, impossible to dismiss. Subscribe right now. This channel covers every chapter of every story like this one, from the surface headline down to the layer where the real meaning lives. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, because this channel does this to every single story it touches, finds the layer most people never reach, and stays there long enough to actually understand what it means. Subscribe first, then keep watching, because the part that reframes everything is coming next.